The humid air of New Year's Eve wasn't enough to deter four friends, Lucas, Mariana, Andre, and Camila, from embarking on an unusual adventure. While the rest of the city prepared for fireworks and toasts, they decided to explore Tingui Park, drawn by stories that the place harbored dark secrets. They arrived at the park shortly before 9 p.m., armed with flashlights and a digital camera. The eerie silence of the area was unsettling, broken only by the occasional sound of dry leaves crunching under their own footsteps. Everything seemed normal until they ventured deeper along the trails. That's when they heard the first noises, heavy footsteps, as if someone was following them. They stopped abruptly and turned, but there was no one there. Mariana nervously laughed, saying it was probably just an animal, but Lucas felt uneasy. He had sensed something strange the moment he stepped into the park. As they continued, the trail led them to the secluded Ukrainian monument, lit only by the full moon. The temperature suddenly dropped, as if an invisible shadow had cloaked the place. "Do you feel that? Like someone's watching us?" Lucas murmured. Before anyone could answer, a piercing scream echoed from the nearby woods. They froze, exchanging panicked glances. "Was that a person?" whispered Camila, clutching Andre's arm. "Maybe. Let's check it out," Andre suggested, more out of pride than courage. They followed the sound, their flashlights illuminating the gnarled trunks of the trees. They came across a wooden bench covered in dry leaves. On the bench, something glinted, an old clock, its face cracked. The second hand was spinning far too quickly, as if time in that place followed different rules. "This isn't normal," Mariana said, her voice trembling. Lucas, however, seemed fascinated. "It's probably just a broken mechanism," he said, trying to convince himself as he picked up the object. At that moment, they heard laughter, low and distorted, coming from all directions. Andre's flashlight began to flicker, and for a brief instant, the beam of light illuminated a tall, hooded figure standing among the trees. "Run!" he shouted. Terrified, they ran back down the trail, but the park seemed to have changed. The trees were closer together, as if forming a barricade. The feeling of being chased was overwhelming, and muffled laughter continued to echo around them. Camila tripped and fell, screaming as she looked behind her. "I saw something. It's following us." They reached the park's entrance exactly at midnight. Sweaty and out of breath, they felt a fleeting sense of relief as they saw the city illuminated by fireworks. The sense of safety, however, was short-lived. When they reviewed the photos on the camera, the truth became even more terrifying. The hooded figure appeared in every picture, always in the background, even during moments when they knew they were completely alone. In some photos, the hooded face seemed closer, with indistinct but clearly inhuman features. In one of the last pictures, taken at the wooden bench, the clock was no longer there. In its place, a message had been scratched into the wood. "Time is an illusion." After that night, the group never returned to the park. Lucas, however, began to be plagued by recurring nightmares. He always saw the clock, its hands spinning wildly, and the hooded figure staring at him. Mariana claimed to hear laughter in her house during the night. Andre moved to another city without explanation, and Camila refused to talk about what had happened. Some locals say that, to this day, the bench and clock can still be found in the park, though they are never in the same place. There are reports of people hearing laughter or feeling chills when passing near the Ukrainian monument. Others claim that anyone who tries to take the clock home mysteriously disappears before the next New Year's Eve. And so, Tingui Park remains a charming place during the day, but is avoided at night by those who know the story. After all, they say time can be the cruelest prison for those who dare to challenge it. The Aokigahara Forest at the base of Mount Fuji is a place of haunting beauty, but its reputation goes far beyond its scenery. Known as the Suicide Forest, its dense trees and oppressive silence create the perfect backdrop for tales of horror. On December 31st, 2012, Ethan and Sophie, a young American couple, decided to explore the area out of morbid curiosity, unaware that this would become the most terrifying night of their lives. They arrived at the forest's entrance at noon on a cold winter day. The sky was clear, but as soon as they stepped past the tree line, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier, and sunlight barely penetrated the dense canopy above. Equipped with a DSLR camera and flashlights, they followed trails marked by colorful ribbons left by previous visitors. At first, they joked about the eerie vibe, but soon the oppressive silence began to weigh on them. The forest was treacherous. The trees all looked alike, and the paths were indistinguishable from the roots that clawed out of the ground like twisted fingers. As they ventured deeper, Ethan began to feel nauseated. "It must be the altitude," Sophie suggested, though Ethan's expression said otherwise. Then, their phones stopped working simultaneously. No signal, no GPS, only the muffled sound of their footsteps. After hours of walking, the sun began to set, and a thin mist enveloped the forest. The silence was broken by a barely perceptible sound, like whispers coming from all directions. Sophie suggested they turn back, but the ribbons had disappeared. Panic set in as they realized they were walking in circles. Every tree looked identical to the last. As night fell completely, they spotted a tattered red tent among the trees. At first, they felt relief, hoping to find help. However, as they approached, they saw that the tent was abandoned. Inside, they found a yellowed letter written in shaky Japanese characters. There was nothing else there, only an inexplicable sensation of being watched. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the forest, and Sophie let out a piercing scream. Ethan turned quickly and saw a female figure emerging from the darkness. She had long, disheveled hair covering her face and wore a stained white kimono. The woman seemed to float, moving in a disjointed, erratic manner, as though trapped in a never-ending loop of twisted and unnatural movements. Ethan tried to pull Sophie away, but she seemed frozen, staring at the figure. "Run!" he shouted, yanking Sophie with all his strength. They ran aimlessly, stumbling over roots and scratching themselves on low branches. The whispers had turned into distant screams, echoing through the forest. Each time Ethan looked back, the figure was closer, her erratic movements becoming faster and more threatening. After hours of desperate running, they finally saw lights in the distance. It was the main road. A forest ranger found them staggering out of the trees, their faces pale with terror. He looked at them with a seriousness that sent chills down their spines. "You're lucky," he said. "After dark, few people make it out alive." Back at their hotel, Ethan downloaded the photos from the forest. To his surprise, all of them were distorted, as if the camera had captured something the human eye could not see. All except one. The last photo clearly showed the female figure, with part of her face revealed. Her hollow eyes stared directly into the lens, as if aware she was being watched. The following days were marked by silence between Ethan and Sophie. Both were scarred by the experience, but couldn't bring themselves to discuss what had happened. When they finally had the letter translated, the expert revealed its chilling message. "The forest keeps its lost souls. Those who enter do not leave without leaving something behind. If you still breathe, it is not finished with you." Ethan and Sophie broke up shortly after. Ethan withdrew into himself, trying to forget the ordeal, though he often woke in the middle of the night with the feeling of being watched. Sophie began hearing whispers in her house, even when she was alone. Both avoided the forest for the rest of their lives, but deep down, they knew something had followed them from Aokigahara, something that would never let them escape completely. At the turn of the millennium, while most celebrated New Year's Eve, a small group of teenagers decided to break into an abandoned house in the Santa Teresa neighborhood of Belo Horizonte. The house, known as the House of Spirits, was infamous for stories of disappearances, unexplained noises, and a sinister mirror that no one dared to touch. They arrived at 11 p.m., carrying a bottle of cheap wine and a portable radio to heighten the thrill. The house, worn down by time, appeared even more menacing under the moonlight. Broken windows, walls covered in profane graffiti, and a smell that mixed mildew with something metallic, like dried blood. Despite the eerie atmosphere, the group laughed and mocked the legends, confident it was just another silly dare to mark the new year. Upstairs, they found the legendary mirror, shrouded in a thick layer of dust. It was enormous, framed by dark wood engraved with symbols none of them could recognize. Around the mirror, melted candle stubs and small handprints, as if children had touched the glass from the inside, added to the unsettling aura. Laughing nervously, they began summoning spirits as a joke. At first, it was all laughs, but their tone grew more serious as the atmosphere shifted. The radio started tuning to random stations, emitting static interspersed with distorted voices. Then at 11:50 p.m., tension peaked when they all saw their reflections in the mirror moving independently. Their mirrored selves smiled, but not in a friendly way. It was a vacant, cruel grin, as if mocking them. Suddenly, Anna, one of the friends, felt a cold hand grip her shoulder. When she turned around, no one was there. Raphael tried to smash the mirror with a chair, but the wood seemed to decay in his hands before he could strike. The mirror remained untouched, now glowing faintly, revealing not only their distorted reflections but also additional figures, strangers with inhuman appearances, surrounding the group as if spectating a macabre performance. At midnight, the radio emitted an ear-piercing noise and a single phrase in a deep, guttural voice. "You have trespassed where you should never have gone." The room plunged into total darkness, and the group felt invisible hands pulling them toward the mirror. When the fireworks lit up the sky, the neighbor next door heard screams of terror, followed by absolute silence. He called the police, but when officers arrived, they found the house empty. The mirror, however, displayed something strange. Silhouettes of people seemed to move inside the glass, like prisoners knocking on an invisible window. In the following days, the house was sealed off. But residents claim that every New Year's Eve at 11:59 p.m., the house lights flicker, and distorted laughter echoes through the neighborhood. Those who dare to look directly into the mirror through the window swear they see the teenagers trapped on the other side, reaching out as if begging for help. But according to legend, anyone who stares too long feels something cold and sticky grip the back of their neck. Those curious souls are never seen again.